The massive starship Invictus drifted silently through the void, its crystalline propulsion systems barely visible against the backdrop of distant stars. High Commander Zorgan stood on the command bridge, his iridescent scales shifting from deep purple to midnight blue as he surveyed the holographic display before him. The vast Kaarthak Empire stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, encompassing over 12,000 star systems and nearly 40,000 inhabited worlds. For 6 millennia, the Empire had expanded methodically, assimilating or subjugating lesser species as they were encountered. Zorgan's elongated fingers, each tipped with a translucent claw, manipulated the display controls with practiced efficiency. His large, multifaceted eyes reflected the scrolling data as he reviewed the routine sector sweep reports. The Kaarthak's technological superiority was absolute. Faster-than-light travel had been mastered millennia ago. Alongside matter conversion, gravity manipulation, and neural interface technologies that lesser species could scarcely comprehend. Subsector 783, cleared. High Commander, reported First Officer Clad, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertones of the warrior caste. No anomalies detected. Continuing sweep pattern as established. Zorgan acknowledged with a dismissive gesture. These sector sweeps were tedious but necessary. The Empire's prosperity depended on order, on the rigid hierarchical structure that had served them for countless generations. Every member knew their place, from the ruling sovereignty caste to which Zorgan belonged, down through the warriors, technicians, cultivators, and laborers. High Commander, called out the sensor technician, her voice carrying the precise, measured tones of the technician caste. Long-range scouts report an inhabited system previously unmarked in our databases. Designation Sol, 3rd planet appears to be primary life-bearing world. Zorgan's interest flickered momentarily. Discovering new species was relatively uncommon in this well-charted section of space. Display characteristics, he ordered. The holographic projection shifted to show a blue-green world with significant water coverage and 7 continental landmasses. Data scrolled alongside the image. Atmospheric composition, radiation readings, energy signatures. Technological assessment. Zorgan inquired, his interest waning already. Primitive High Commander. Level 0.7 on the Imperial scale. They have achieved limited spaceflight within their own system, established orbital habitats, and landed on their moon and neighboring planet. No signs of faster-than-light capability. Significant electromagnetic communications and primitive fusion power. However, their civilization appears highly fractured, with multiple competing power structures. Zorgan flicked through the preliminary sociological data with growing disinterest. Another primitive species stumbling toward the stars while still battling among themselves. Hardly worthy of the Empire's full attention. Are there any strategic resources or anomalous readings? He asked, preparing to assign the standard minimal observation protocol. The technician hesitated. There are some unusual energy signatures we cannot immediately classify, and their social structures are complex, unusually adaptive. Their technological progress rate exceeds standard models for species at this development stage. Zorgan's attention sharpened slightly. Anomalies could represent either opportunity or threat. The Kaarthak Empire had not survived for millennia by ignoring potential advantages. Analyze their social hierarchy. Identify leverage points for potential future assimilation. Hours later, Zorgan reviewed the compiled analysis. The species called themselves humans, and they were indeed fragmented, divided by geographical boundaries, resource allocation disputes, and ideological differences. Their technology was crude, but advancing at a concerning rate. Most interesting was the apparent value they placed on their female population, evident through media, protective social structures, and resource allocation patterns. Their females appear to hold significant social value despite physical dimorphism indicating lesser combat capability, noted the sociological analyst. This suggests potential leverage for minimal impact assessment protocols. Zorgan considered this. Standard protocol for species at this development level involved limited specimen collection for detailed study, a more efficient approach than full surveillance. The information gained would be valuable when the species eventually achieved interstellar capability and formal first contact became necessary. Implement a low-impact assessment operation, Zorgan ordered, already turning his attention to more pressing matters. Collect a diverse sampling of their females for biological and sociological study. Ensure covert execution using standard stealth. Protocols. By your command, High Commander, responded the mission coordinator. Assault Team Alpha will prepare for immediate deployment. With that simple order, one among thousands Zorgan would issue that day, the fate of two civilizations was set in motion. The night sky over Santiago, Chile, was exceptionally clear, the stars shimmering with unusual brightness against the backdrop of the Andes Mountains. Dr. Eris Thorne stood on the observation deck of the Cerro Tololo Inter-American Observatory, her eyes not on the massive telescope behind her, but on the handheld device displaying her latest calculations. The data made no sense, or rather, it made too much sense. Her theories on wormhole stabilization had begun as thought experiments, mathematical exercises to explore the theoretical limits of faster-than-light travel. But the stellar phenomena she'd been observing suggested something incredible. Her equations might actually work in practice. "This can't be right," she muttered, pushing a strand of dark hair from her face as she recalculated the gravitational coefficient. The stars shouldn't behave this way unless... A sudden flicker of movement caught her attention. Something had passed between her and the stars, something large enough to momentarily block the light. But there were no scheduled flights over the observatory. Strict air traffic restrictions protected the sensitive instruments. Eris looked up, squinting into the darkness. For a moment, she thought she saw a distortion in the air, like heat haze on a summer road. Then nothing. She returned to her calculations, but a prickling sensation at the base of her neck wouldn't subside. Someone was watching her. She turned slowly, surveying the empty observation deck. "Hello," she called, her voice echoing slightly in the cool night air. "Is someone there?" The air itself seemed to ripple, and suddenly they were there. Three figures unlike anything she had ever seen. Tall, slender beings with iridescent scales and large, faceted eyes that reflected the starlight in disorienting patterns. Their movements were fluid, almost hypnotic, as they surrounded her with impossible speed. Eris opened her mouth to scream, but no sound emerged. A field of energy enveloped her, freezing her in place. She could only watch in silent horror as one of the creatures approached, carrying a device that emitted a soft, pulsing light. The last thing she remembered was the cold touch of alien fingers against her temple and a voice that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly into her mind. Specimen secured. Commencing extraction. In Moscow, Captain Eva Rostova walked alone through Gorky Park, enjoying the rare feeling of being unarmed and out of uniform. After 3 consecutive deployments with Russian Special Forces, the simple pleasure of civilian clothes and no imminent threats felt almost decadent. At 32, Eva had earned her reputation as one of the most effective tactical commanders in the Russian military. Her superiors valued her pragmatism, her ability to assess situations without emotional interference, and her unwavering focus on mission objectives. What they didn't see was how exhausting it was to maintain that persona, to constantly suppress the fear and doubt that plagued every soldier. The park was nearly empty this late in the evening, the paths illuminated by ornate lamps that cast long shadows across the manicured lawns. Eva paused beside the fountain, watching the play of light on water as she contemplated her future. Another 5 years of service would secure her pension, but the physical and psychological toll was mounting. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't immediately register the silence that had fallen over the park. The fountain had stopped. The distant traffic noise had disappeared. Even the wind seemed to have stilled. Eva's combat instincts flared to life. She spun around, automatically reaching for the sidearm that wasn't there. The air before her shimmered like a mirage, and suddenly she was facing three figures that defied description. Not human, not animal, but something wholly alien. Years of training took over. Eva launched herself backward, creating distance while assessing threats and escape routes. But her body responded sluggishly, as though moving through water. A field of energy surrounded her, limiting her movements to agonizingly slow motion. The creatures approached unhurriedly, their movements precise and coordinated. One raised a device toward her, emitting a beam of pale blue light that scanned her from head to toe. Physical capabilities exceed expected parameters, a voice stated, the words forming in her mind rather than reaching her ears. Combat training evident. Adjust containment field accordingly. The energy field intensified, and Eva felt her consciousness slipping away despite her desperate resistance. Her last thought was a cold, professional assessment. There. Efficient, well-equipped, experienced in capture operations. Shanghai's skyline glittered like a constellation brought to Earth, the towers of glass and steel reflecting the city's vibrant nightlife. In a research laboratory at the center of the technological district, Mei Lin remained hunched over her workstation long after her colleagues had departed. At 28, Mei had already established herself as one of China's most promising bioengineers. Her work on targeted cellular regeneration had attracted international attention, and tonight's breakthrough, successfully programming stem cells to recognize and repair specific nerve damage, represented the culmination of 3 years of relentless effort. It works, she whispered to herself, watching the cellular response on the high-resolution monitor. It actually works. Mei leaned back in her chair, allowing herself a rare moment of satisfaction. Tomorrow there would be reports to write, press releases to approve, endless meetings with investors and government officials. But tonight, this moment belonged to her alone. She reached for her tea, now cold after hours of neglect, and frowned when the liquid remained perfectly still despite her touch. The cup should have rippled, should have sloshed slightly as she lifted it. Instead, it remained frozen as though time itself had stopped. A cold dread settled in May's stomach as she realized the entire laboratory had fallen silent. The constant hum of equipment, the soft whir of the ventilation system, all silent. Even the digital clock on her workstation had stopped, the numbers frozen mid-blink. She stood slowly, her eyes drawn to a peculiar distortion in the air near the laboratory door. The distortion expanded, revealing 3 figures that transcended her understanding of biology. Their bodies seemed to shift between solid and translucent, their movements governed by laws of physics she couldn't comprehend. May backed away, her analytical mind racing to make sense of what she was seeing. Not hallucinations. The creatures manipulated physical objects as they advanced toward her. Not humans in costumes. Their anatomical structure was fundamentally different, with joints that bent in impossible directions and digits that divided and rejoined as they moved. Unprecedented neural activity. A voice resonated within her mind. This specimen demonstrates exceptional cognitive function. One of the creatures extended a limb toward her, the appendage elongating unnaturally across the distance between them. May tried to scream, but her voice was trapped in her throat as an energy field enveloped her, suspending her in place while her mind remained terrifyingly alert. Specimen secured. Commencing extraction. The university campus in London was quiet at this late hour, but the student union building blazed with light and activity. Inside, Aisha Khan addressed a crowd of students and activists, her passion evident in every gesture. The technology exists right now to solve these problems, she insisted, dark eyes flashing as she swept her gaze across the audience. What's lacking isn't capability, but will. The code I've developed proves we can track resource allocation in real time, expose corruption, and create transparency in aid distribution. At 23, Aisha had already earned a reputation as both a brilliant programmer and a fearless advocate. Born to Pakistani immigrants in London's East End, she had fought for her education with unwavering determination, earning scholarships that took her from a crowded public school to the prestigious computer science program where she now excelled. Her latest project combined her technical skills with her activism, an open-source platform that tracked humanitarian aid from donor to recipient, making misappropriation virtually impossible. The demonstration had gone perfectly, and the crowd responded with enthusiastic applause. As the meeting disbanded, Aisha stayed behind to answer questions and exchange contact information with like-minded activists. The large room gradually emptied until only she remained, gathering her equipment and notes. The air conditioning shut off abruptly, leaving an unnatural silence. Aisha looked up, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she was alone in the building. The lights flickered once, then stabilized. She hurriedly packed her laptop, unnerved by the sudden change in atmosphere. The air before her rippled like water, and Aisha froze in place, her hand halfway to her phone. 3 figures materialized from the distortion, being so alien that her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. Their bodies seemed almost liquid in their movement, flowing rather than walking as they approached. Aisha found her voice and screamed, the sound echoing through the empty building. She turned to run, but an invisible force held her in place. One of the creatures approached, studying her with multifaceted eyes that reflected her terrified expression. Like fractured mirrors. Unusual vocal response. A voice echoed inside her head. Note potential for communication study. A device was pressed against her neck, and darkness claimed her. Aboard the Galactic scout cruiser Shadow Fong, the abduction teams returned with their captives. The sleek vessel maintained its position in high Earth orbit, hidden for detection by advanced cloaking technology that bent light and other electromagnetic radiation around its hull. In the processing chamber, the human females were subjected to initial assessment, suspended in transparent examination pods while automated systems scanned their biological structures and neural patterns. Galactic scientists observed with clinical detachment, recording observations in the Empire's vast database. Subject exhibits unusual neurological complexity, noted the chief xenobiologist, reviewing the scans of Eris Thorn. Cognitive structures suggest advanced abstract thinking capabilities. The muscular development and reflex responses of this specimen indicate specialized combat training. Observed another, studying Eva Rostova's readings. Note the elevated stress hormone levels and controlled respiratory pattern despite unconscious state. Similar observations were made about each captive. Maylin's exceptional brain activity, particularly in regions associated with pattern recognition. Aisha Khan's neural architecture showing unusual connectivity between logical and emotional processing centers. The senior scientist compiled the preliminary findings into a report for High Commander's organ. Specimens secured and undergoing standard analysis. Initial results suggest greater biological and neurological diversity than expected for a level 0.7 species. Recommend extended study period. No complications anticipative. Zorgan reviewed the report briefly, noted its contents without particular interest, and approved the continuation of standard protocols. The humans were simply another primitive species to be studied and cataloged, perhaps exploited when they eventually achieved sufficient technological advancement to be useful. Nothing more. How catastrophically wrong that assessment would prove to be. The disappearances were initially treated as isolated incidents. A scientist missing from an observatory in Chile. A Russian military officer vanishing during leave. A Chinese researcher failing to return home after work. A student activist in London last seen leaving a campus building alone. But in an age of ubiquitous surveillance and interconnected information systems, patterns emerged with unprecedented speed. Security footage, though often distorted or incomplete, captured inexplicable anomalies, air distortions, temporary equipment failures, and in a few instances, glimpses of non-human figures. Within 72 hours, intelligence agencies across the globe had identified over 200 similar cases spanning 6 continents. The victims shared few obvious commonalities except gender. All were female, ranging in age from 16 to 45, with diverse ethnicities, nationalities, and occupations. Governments initially contained the information, fearing public panic. But fragmentary footage leaked online, spreading virally across social media platforms and triggering waves of speculation. Conspiracy theories proliferated, ranging from secret government experiments to supernatural phenomena. Then came the watershed moment. Simultaneous press conferences in Washington, Moscow, Beijing, London, and New Delhi. Government spokespersons confirmed the reality of extraterrestrial intervention and the abduction of citizens. Initial disbelief gave way to collective horror as the evidence was presented. Enhanced security footage, satellite tracking of anomalous objects in Earth orbit, correlated electromagnetic disturbances at abduction sites. Within hours, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session, broadcast live across the globe. For the first time in human history, representatives from traditionally antagonistic nations sat side by side, united by a threat that transcended geopolitical divisions. "We face an unprecedented situation," began the UN Secretary-General, her voice steady despite the extraordinary circumstances. "The evidence before us confirms what many will find difficult to accept. Earth has been visited by an extraterrestrial species that has taken hostile action against our citizens." The Russian ambassador spoke next, his usual diplomatic reserve replaced by cold fury. "This is not merely an act of aggression. It is an act of war. These beings, whoever and whatever they are, have violated our sovereignty and targeted our people. They have miscalculated severely," added the Chinese representative. "They may possess advanced technology, but they have failed to understand that humanity will not tolerate such actions." As accusations and demands for action filled the chamber, a military officer in a United States Space Force uniform was escorted to the podium. General Alexander Taggart, commander of the newly established Orbital Defense Initiative, addressed the assembly with the directness of a career soldier. "Distinguished representatives, I will speak plainly. We have confirmed the presence of an extraterrestrial vessel in Earth orbit, employing technology that largely evades our detection capabilities. Our analysis of the abduction patterns suggests these are not random acts, but a coordinated intelligence-gathering operation." She paused, allowing her next words to resonate fully. "We must assume the worst, that these abductions are merely a prelude to further hostile action. Whether their ultimate intention is invasion, colonization, or exploitation is irrelevant at this juncture. What matters is our response." General Taggart presented a comprehensive analysis, orbital tracking data, spectral analyses of energy signatures associated with the aliens' technology, and preliminary assessments of their capabilities based on observed evidence. "We face an adversary with significant technological advantages," she concluded, "but they have revealed critical vulnerabilities through their actions. Their covert approach suggests limited resources in our vicinity. Their targeting of civilians rather than military assets indicates either strategic miscalculation or cultural arrogance. Most importantly, they have given us something that unites humanity like nothing in our history: a common enemy." What followed was unprecedented: a unanimous resolution establishing the Terran Defense Mandate, authorizing the formation of a unified command structure drawing resources and personnel from all UN member states. For the first time since its founding, the United Nations declared war, not against a nation or ideology, but against an extraterrestrial aggressor. The Terran Defense Mandate mobilized resources on a scale that dwarfed any previous human endeavor. Military forces integrated under a unified command structure. Industrial production shifted to war footing. Research facilities worldwide redirected their efforts toward understanding and countering the alien threat. Intelligence agencies pooled information, reconstructing the identities and backgrounds of all known abductees, searching for patterns that might reveal the aliens' objectives. Among the missing was Dr. Eris Thorne, whose theoretical work on space-time manipulation had been largely dismissed by the scientific establishment as too speculative. Now, her colleagues at the observatory brought her research to the attention of Terran Defense Command. Her theories on detecting distortions in space-time and manipulating gravitational fields suddenly seemed not merely plausible, but potentially crucial. Dr. Thorne's equations describe precisely the kind of energy signatures we've detected during the abduction events, explained Dr. James Winters, her former research partner. She theorized that any technology capable of manipulating space-time for faster-than-light travel would create detectable ripples in the fabric of reality, ripples that could be identified and potentially counteracted. Within days, Project Chimera was established, a top-secret initiative based in a hardened underground facility beneath the Swiss Alps. Scientists and engineers from 37 nations worked around the clock, adapting Thorne's theories to practical applications. The first objective, developing technology to detect the aliens' cloaked vessels. Meanwhile, in orbit and beyond, the combined space forces of Earth maintained constant vigilance, waiting for any sign of the enemy's return. Civilian space operations were suspended, satellites repurposed for defense monitoring, and the first weapon systems designed specifically for space combat were rushed into production. Humanity prepared for war on an unprecedented scale, driven by outrage, fear, and a grim determination to rescue their abducted kin and ensure the aliens would never threaten Earth again. Aboard the Shadow Fawn, the captive women were initially kept in isolation, each confined to a transparent cell that permitted observation while preventing contact with other prisoners. The KR-THAC scientists proceeded methodically, subjecting their subjects to a battery of tests: physical examinations, cognitive assessments, psychological evaluations. For the prisoners, the experience was a nightmare of helplessness and disorientation. Strange beings within human anatomies performed incomprehensible procedures. Communication was limited to basic commands projected directly into their minds. Time became meaningless without day-night cycles or regular routines. After what might have been days or weeks, the isolation protocol changed. The women were grouped together in a larger containment area, still transparent, still constantly monitored, but now able to interact. Initial wariness gave way to desperate solidarity. Despite language barriers and cultural differences, they formed connections through shared trauma and the fundamental human need for companionship in adversity. Captain Eva Rostova quickly emerged as a natural leader, her military training providing structure and purpose. First objective, understand our environment. She instructed the others, her accented English serving as their common language. Observe routines, identify patterns, locate potential weaknesses. Mei Lin applied her scientific training to analyzing their surroundings. The air composition is adjusted for us, she noted, studying the subtle changes in the environment. They're maintaining specific oxygen levels, temperature, and humidity. That requires systems. Systems can be compromised. Aisha Khan focused on communication. With remarkable patience, she worked to establish a rudimentary understanding of the aliens' language, not the telepathic commands they projected, but the vocal sounds they used among themselves. Every system has an interface, she reasoned. If we can access even basic commands, we gain options. Dr. Eris Thorne remained quieter than the others, her analytical mind constantly observing and calculating. She noticed patterns in the ship's energy usage, subtle fluctuations in lighting that corresponded with increased activity in certain sections. She began mentally mapping the vessel's power distribution network, identifying critical nodes and potential vulnerabilities. The KR-THAC Guard maintained their rigid adherence to established protocols, their innate sense of superiority preventing them from recognizing the threat posed by their supposedly primitive captives. They failed to notice how the women strategically positioned themselves during examinations to observe control interfaces, or how they systematically tested response times by creating minor disruptions. They're overconfident, Eva observed after a guard dismissed an alert without proper investigation. They follow procedures without questioning, without adapting. Military complacency. I've seen it before. Their technology is advanced, but their thinking is rigid, agreed Mei Lin. They expect compliance based on technological superiority alone. When the KR-THAC finally attempted formal communication, the women were prepared. A senior researcher, accompanied by guards, activated a translation device that converted their language into approximations of human speech. "You will provide information about your species," the researcher stated, the translated words stilted and lacking nuance. "Cooperation will improve your condition." The women exchanged glances, silently communicating the strategy they had discussed in whispers during rest periods. Appear compliant but confused. Provide inconsistent information. Reinforce the KR-THAC's perception of human primitiveness while gathering intelligence. Aisha took the lead, her experience as an activist making her adept at controlling conversations. "We will try to help," she said, affecting a tremulous voice quite unlike her normal confident tone. "But we're simple people. We don't understand why we are here." Over subsequent interrogation sessions, the women fed their captors a carefully constructed mixture of truths, half-truths, and outright misinformation. They described Earth as more technologically primitive than it was, emphasized human division and conflict while downplaying cooperation, and portrayed themselves as unusually knowledgeable exceptions among their kind. Meanwhile, Aisha absorbed every vocalization, every gesture, building a primitive lexicon of KR-THAC language and command protocols. Eris noted which control panels responded to which voice commands. Mei Lin identified the components of their food and environmental systems, looking for chemical compounds that might be repurposed as tools or weapons. Eva assessed guard rotations, response patterns, and security protocols. Slowly, methodically, the captives prepared for their moment of opportunity, unaware that their homeworld was mobilizing on an unprecedented scale to rescue them. Back on Earth, Project Chimera achieved its first major breakthrough. Using Dr. Thorne's theoretical framework, engineers developed a prototype phase disruptor, a device capable of temporarily revealing objects hidden by advanced cloaking technology. The prototype was massive, power-hungry, and limited in range, but it proved the concept. When activated during a test in Earth orbit, it successfully detected energy distortions consistent with a cloaked vessel. The alien ship quickly moved beyond range, but for 17 crucial seconds, Earth's defenders had seen their enemy. "It works," announced Dr. Winters to the assembled Terran Defense Command. The phase disruptor forces their cloaking field to become momentarily visible by flooding the target area with specific energy frequencies that disrupt the field's coherence. "General," Taggart leaned forward, studying the recorded data. "How quickly can we weaponize this technology?" "We're already adapting it for offensive applications," Winters replied. "But more importantly, we've used the readings to develop rudimentary shielding based on similar principles. Preliminary tests suggest it could offer some protection against their energy weapons." Mass production timeline: for portable units, 3 weeks. For installation on orbital platforms and spacecraft, beginning immediately with completion of the first batch within 10 days. Taggart nodded grimly. "Make it 5. The following weeks saw frantic activity as the first phase disruptors were installed on Earth's orbital defense platforms and newly designed interceptor craft. Simultaneously, engineers worked to adapt Dr. Thorne's theories to offensive applications, developing weapons that might penetrate the aliens' defenses. The opportunity to test these developments came sooner than expected. Monitoring stations detected energy fluctuations consistent with the alien vessel moving to a lower orbit. General Taggart authorized the first coordinated strike against the extraterrestrial threat. Orbital defense platforms activated their phase disruptors in sequence, scanning methodically until one registered a hit. The Shadow Fong, previously invisible to Earth's sensors, flickered into visibility as its cloaking field destabilized. Immediately, defense platforms and interceptors converged on the location, launching a barrage of modified kinetic penetrators and newly developed plasma torpedoes. The alien vessel's shields deflected the initial salvo, but sustained fire began to take a toll. Power fluctuations rippled across its hull as the shields struggled to compensate for the unexpectedly effective assault. Aboard the Invictus, High Commander Zorgan received the emergency transmission with disbelief that quickly transformed into rage. The primitives are attacking the scout vessel with effective weapons. His scales darkened to deep crimson, reflecting his fury. Impossible. Their technological level does not permit such capabilities. The report is confirmed. High Commander responded as communications officer. The Shadow Fong reports its cloaking system has been compromised and shield integrity is at 70%. They request permission to engage with full offensive capabilities. Zorgan hesitated, his tactical training asserting itself through his anger. The situation was unprecedented. A level 0.7 species should not possess technology capable of detecting, much less damaging, a KR THAC vessel. Something was very wrong. Order them to withdraw immediately, he commanded. Full emergency protocols. Return to Rendezvous Point Alpha for assessment and repair. By your command, acknowledge the officer, transmitting the orders. Zorgan paced the command deck, his mind racing. This changed everything. A species capable of adapting so quickly, of developing countermeasures to KR THAC technology without direct access, represented a potential threat beyond what their development level suggested. Prepare a full report for the High Council, he ordered, and dispatch a tactical analysis team to review all data from the Shadow Fawn. I want to know exactly how these primitives detected our vessel and what weapons they employed. His first officer approached cautiously, aware of Zorgan's volatile mood. High Commander, the Council will require a response strategy. These primitives have committed an act of aggression against the Empire. Zorgan's faceted eyes narrowed. Indeed, they have, Clat, and they will learn the consequences of such audacity. Prepare Battle Group 7 for deployment to the Sol system. 3 battle cruisers should be sufficient to make an example of these insects. On Earth, the successful strike against the alien vessel triggered cautious celebration. The enemy had fled rather than continuing the engagement, a tactical victory that provided valuable intelligence and a much-needed morale boost. They're vulnerable, General Taggart announced to the Terran Defense Council. Their technology isn't infallible, and now we have direct sensor readings of their propulsion system, shield harmonics, and energy signatures. Strategic analysts worked feverishly to interpret the data. Their withdrawal suggests limited resources in our vicinity, noted the tactical assessment team. But we must anticipate a stronger response. This was likely a scout or research vessel, not a dedicated warship. How long until they return? Asked the UN Secretary-General. Unknown, Taggart replied honestly. But they will return. We've demonstrated both the will and capability to resist. No technologically advanced species would leave such a challenge unanswered. Then we use every moment to prepare, stated the Russian representative. The phase disruptor technology must be deployed globally. Every satellite, every vessel, every defense platform. And we need more effective weapons, added the Chinese delegate. The data shows their shields eventually began to degrade under sustained fire. With proper calibration, we can develop systems specifically tuned to their vulnerabilities. The Council unanimously approved an acceleration of the Terran Defense Mandate, allocating additional resources and authority to prepare for the anticipated alien response. Intelligence analysts continued studying the abduction patterns and the backgrounds of the victims, seeking any insight into the aliens' objectives. There's something about Dr. Thorne's research, mused Dr. Winters during a late-night analysis session. Why take her specifically? Her work was theoretical, unpublished outside academic circles, yet provided the foundation for our countermeasures against their technology. You think they knew about her research? Asked his colleague. I think they recognized her potential threat, Winters replied, which means they're monitoring us more closely than we realized, and that they understand enough about human scientific progress to identify key researchers. This disturbing theory was relayed to General Taggart, who immediately ordered increased security around all major research facilities and enhanced counterintelligence measures. The race to prepare Earth's defenses continued with renewed urgency, driven by the certainty that the next encounter would determine humanity's fate. Meanwhile, aboard the damaged Shadow Fawn, the human captives seized their opportunity amidst the chaos of the Terran attack. When the first hits rocked the vessel, emergency protocols diverted power from non-essential systems, including the full-spectrum monitoring of the detention area. Now, Eva ordered as the guards rushed to battle stations, leaving only minimal security. Mei Lin had spent weeks synthesizing a corrosive compound from elements in their food and environment. She deployed it against an access panel near their containment field, creating a localized system failure that registered as battle damage in the ship's overwhelmed diagnostic systems. As the containment field flickered, Eva led a coordinated assault against the remaining guards during a vulnerable shift change. Years of Special Forces training made her a formidable opponent despite the K'arthak's physical advantages. With surprise on their side and the ship under external attack, the women overpowered the unprepared guards. Aisha accessed a secondary communication panel, her weeks of observation allowing her to navigate the alien interface. "I think I can send a signal during the fluctuations in their defensive systems," she explained hurriedly. "We need to transmit as much information as possible. Shield frequencies, weapon specifications, anything that might help Earth." Dr. Thorne joined her, applying her theoretical knowledge to identify critical technical data. "Focus on these power signatures," she directed. "They correspond to their primary defensive systems. And these," she indicated another set of readings. "These are faster-than-light drive harmonics. The principles match my equations." Together, they compiled a data packet containing crucial technical information about the K'arthak vessel. As the Shadow Fawn prepared for emergency faster-than-light translation to escape the Terran attack, Aisha exploited a momentary vulnerability in the communication security protocols to transmit a tight beam burst signal toward Earth. The crude, coded transmission reached a Terran defense satellite moments before the alien vessel disappeared from sensors. Analysis algorithms flagged it as anomalous, neither Terran nor matching known K'arthak patterns. When decrypted, its contents proved invaluable. Technical specifications for K'arthak shield frequencies, weapon energy signatures, and propulsion system parameters. General Taggart received the analysis with cautious optimism. "This is either extremely good fortune or deliberate assistance," she noted. "The timing and content suggest the latter. Our people aboard that ship managed to send us exactly what we need. The question is whether they'll survive to see how we use it," replied Dr. Winters soberly. Taggart's expression hardened. "Then we'd better make damn sure their sacrifice wasn't in vain." Project Chimera immediately redirected its efforts, using the new data to develop a weapon theoretically capable of overwhelming K'arthak defensive systems. The Resonance Cascade concept evolved rapidly, a device designed to emit precisely calibrated energy pulses that would interact destructively with K'arthak shield frequencies, creating a cascade failure that could disable their systems without destroying the vessels. "It's a disabler, not a destroyer," explained Dr. Winters to the Defense Council, "which gives us the option of rescuing our people if they're still aboard when the aliens return." The prototype was massive and power-hungry, requiring a dedicated power station and multiple redundant systems to maintain stability. But it represented humanity's best hope against superior technology. "We'll need to be in optimal firing position," Dr. Winters cautioned. "Too far, and the effect dissipates. Too close, and our own systems might be affected by the backlash." General Taggart nodded grimly. "We'll have one shot at this. Make it count." The waiting was the hardest part. Intelligence analysts predicted the aliens would return with greater force, but the timing remained uncertain. Every day brought new advancements in Earth's defensive capabilities, but also mounting anxiety about the fate of the abducted. When the K'arthak returned, they came with overwhelming force. 3 massive battlecruisers emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, their arrival detected by the new sensor network based on Dr. Thorne's theories. Battle stations, ordered General Taggart as the alert reached Terran Defense Command. All units implement Chimera protocols. Civilian centers begin immediate evacuation to hardened shelters. Aboard the lead Galactic battlecruiser Subjugator, High Commander Zorgan observed the primitive world with cold fury. The damage to the Shadow Fong and the subsequent data breach were unforgivable embarrassments. His career, perhaps even his life, now depended on a swift and decisive victory. Establish high orbit and begin targeting sequence, he commanded. Prioritize military installations and defensive emplacements. By your command, acknowledge the weapons officer. Primary weapons charging. Shields at maximum capacity. Open communication channel, Zorgan ordered. Let the primitives hear their doom. Throughout Earth's communication networks, the KR-THAC transmission overrode all signals, a demonstration of technological superiority intended to induce terror and submission. Attention, inhabitants of Sol 3. Zorgan's translated voice resonated across all broadcast frequencies. You have committed aggression against the KR-THAC Empire. This is an unforgivable offense. Surrender the individuals responsible for attacking our vessel and submit to Imperial authority or face annihilation. In Terran Defense Command, General Taggart listened to the ultimatum with grim determination. Send response, she ordered. Audio only. Her measured voice carried none of her inner tension as she replied. This is General Alexander Taggart of Terran Defense Command. Your forces illegally entered our sovereign territory and abducted our citizens. We demand their immediate return and your withdrawal from our system. We have no desire for conflict, but we will defend our people with all necessary force. Aboard the Subjugator, Zorgan received the response with disbelief that quickly turned to rage. They dare to issue demands? Begin the attack. Target their largest population centers first. The KR-THAC battlecruisers moved into attack formation, their massive weapons systems powering up. But as they approached optimal firing range, the Terran defense platforms activated their phase disruptors in a synchronized sequence, momentarily revealing the exact positions of the alien vessels. Immediately, hundreds of Terran interceptors launched from concealed positions around the solar system. A fraction of the aliens' firepower, but positioned according to a carefully calculated strategy. Their mission was not to destroy the battlecruisers, but to maneuver them into the optimal position for the Resonance Cascade weapon. The primitives are deploying defensive measures, reported the KR-THAC tactical officer. Crewed vessels approaching in attack formation. Eliminate them, Zorgan ordered dismissively. Then proceed with the primary attack. The battlecruiser's weapons systems targeted the approaching Terran vessels, unleashing devastating energy beams that destroyed dozens of interceptors in the initial salvo. But the human pilots had trained for this moment, executing evasive maneuvers while continuing to herd the larger alien vessels toward the designated kill zone. High Commander, their attack pattern is unusual, observed First Officer Klatt. They appear to be attempting to position us rather than inflict damage. Zorgan studied the tactical display, his experienced eye recognizing the potential trap. Evasive maneuvers, break formation, and his order came too late. The Resonance Cascade weapon, concealed on a stealth platform in high Earth orbit, activated at precisely the calculated moment. A precisely modulated energy pulse washed over the KR-THAC vessels, interacting with their shield frequencies in ways their designers had never anticipated. The effect was immediate and devastating. Shield generators overloaded, energy systems fluctuated wildly, and control interfaces sputtered with conflicting commands. Throughout the KR-THAC fleet, non-essential systems shut down as emergency protocols attempted to contain the cascade failure. What is happening? Demanded Zorgan as the command deck of the Subjugator dimmed to emergency lighting. Restore power. Shields. Critical systems failure, reported the increasingly panicked operations officer. Cascade effect spreading through all connected systems. Attempting isolation protocols. Zorgan recognized the disaster unfolding around him. Somehow, these primitives had developed a weapon specifically calibrated to KR-THAC technology, knowledge they should not possibly possess. Unless the data breach from the Shadow Fawn, he realized aloud. They used our own technology against us. On Earth, General Taggart watched the sensor readings with cautious optimism. The resonance cascade is working. Their shields are down, weapons offline. Primary systems appear to be in flux. Deploy boarding teams, she ordered. Priority objective is recovery of abducted personnel. Secondary objective is capture of command personnel for intelligence value. The specially trained boarding teams launch from concealed positions, piloting modified craft equipped with docking mechanisms compatible with KR-THAC hull designs, another adaptation based on the data from the Shadow Fawn. Aboard the crippled subjugator, Zorgan ordered his warriors to prepare for boarders. Defend the command deck at all costs. Initiate self-destruct sequence if breach is imminent. The first Terran boarding craft attached to the battlecruiser's hull, cutting through the outer layers with modified plasma torches. Special Forces teams in sealed combat suits entered the alien vessel, armed with weapons designed specifically to combat KR-THAC physiology, non-lethal sonic disruptors that exploited their sensitive auditory systems, alongside more conventional firearms. The boarding of the subjugator was not the only operation underway. Similar teams targeted the other battlecruisers, focusing on areas identified as potential detention centers based on the Shadow Fawn schematics. Aboard the subjugator, a particular boarding team fought their way through surprisingly light resistance toward the command deck. Led by a stern-faced colonel who had trained specifically for this mission, they moved with disciplined precision through the alien corridors. Meanwhile, on the command deck, Zorgan prepared for his final stand. The humiliation of defeat was unthinkable, but the failure to protect Imperial technology was worse. The self-destruct sequence had been initiated, set to detonate once the command deck was breached. "High Commander," urged First Officer Klatt, "you must evacuate. The Empire cannot lose your knowledge and experience." Zorgan's scales flickered between the deep purple of rage and the blue-black of despair. "I will not flee from primitives," he declared. "The High Council will know that I faced the enemy with honor." The command deck doors shuddered under heavy impact. The remaining KR-THAC warriors took defensive positions, weapons ready for a final, hopeless battle. The doors burst inward, and the Terran boarding team entered in combat formation, weapons trained on the KR-THAC command staff. Their leader stepped forward, removing her helmet to reveal the cold, determined face of Captain Eva Rostova. "High Commander Zorgan," she stated, her voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. "You are hereby detained under the authority of the Terran Defense Mandate for crimes against humanity." Zorgan stared in disbelief at the human female, one of the specimens from the Shadow Fawn, now standing before him not as a captive but as a conqueror. The impossibility of it struck him like a physical blow. "How?" he managed, his translator struggling to convey his shock. "You underestimated us," Eva replied simply. "A mistake your empire won't repeat." As Terran forces secured the command deck, a technician called urgently to Eva. "Captain, we've detected an active self-destruct sequence. 2 minutes remaining." Eva turned to Zorgan, her expression hardening. "Deactivate it. Now." The High Commander's multifaceted eyes reflected a mixture of defeat and defiance. "I cannot. The sequence is locked." From the doorway came a new voice, calm, analytical, and distinctly familiar to Zorgan from intelligence briefings. "The primary authorization node is there," said Dr. Aristhorn, pointing to a specific control panel as she entered the command deck. "The override sequence will require a primary sovereignty authorization code, followed by a reverse harmonic pattern." She looked directly at Zorgan. "Your empire may be willing to sacrifice you, Commander, but are you willing to die for their pride?" Something in her quiet confidence broke through Zorgan's remaining resolve. With a gesture of defeated resignation, he moved to the designated panel and entered a complex sequence of commands. The pulsing red alert indicator ceased, and the background hum of the self-destruct system powered down. "A wise decision," Eva acknowledged coldly. "Secure the prisoners and begin evacuation of all recovered personnel." Throughout the three battlecruisers, similar scenes played out as Terran forces gradually gained control. The KR THAC, their technological advantage neutralized and their hierarchical command structure disrupted, offered decreasing resistance as word of the High Commander's capture spread. The abducted humans, not just the key figures like Dr. Thorne and the others, but all who had been taken, were located and evacuated to Terran vessels. Medical teams stood ready to treat physical and psychological trauma, while intelligence officers prepared to debrief them about their experiences. On the command deck of the Subjugator, now secured by Terran forces, Eva Rostova and Dr. Thorne confronted their former captor. Zorgan, bound but still maintaining his imperial dignity, regarded them with a mixture of resentment and reluctant respect. "You have won a battle," he stated flatly, "but the Empire spans thousands of worlds. This defeat will not go unanswered." "Perhaps," acknowledged Dr. Thorne, "but the next time, your Empire will face a united humanity that understands your technology and has proven willing to defend itself with all necessary force. Is it a confrontation your Council truly desires?" Zorgan had no answer. The unthinkable had happened. A primitive species had not only resisted the KR-THAC Empire, but had handed it a humiliating defeat. The political and strategic ramifications would echo through the imperial hierarchy for generations. As the Terran forces completed their evacuation, taking with them both the rescued abductees and select KR-THAC prisoners, including High Commander Zorgan, the damaged alien vessels were secured in high Earth orbit, prizes of war to be studied and eventually reverse-engineered. The victory was not without cost. Hundreds of Terran pilots and Special Forces personnel had died in the assault. Earth's defense systems had been strained to their limits, and the psychological impact of confirmed alien contact, hostile contact, would forever alter human civilization. But humanity had prevailed. In the face of a technologically superior enemy, they had united, adapted, and overcome, transforming from planetary civilization to interstellar power through the crucible of crisis. For months after the battle, a formal inquiry convened in a neutral location, a space station constructed specifically for the purpose in Earth orbit. Representatives of the KR-THAC Empire, dispatched by the High Council after lengthy negotiations, sat across from the unified Terran delegation. The KR-THAC emissaries, initially expecting to dictate terms to a defeated primitive species, found themselves facing the architects of their empire's most significant military defeat in centuries. General Taggart, now Supreme Commander of the Terran Defense Force, led the human delegation with quiet authority. Beside her sat Dr. Thorne, Eva Rostova, Mei Lin, Aisha Khan, and other key figures from the conflict, living symbols of humanity's resilience. The High Council acknowledges, began the senior KR-THAC representative with evident reluctance, that the actions taken by High Commander Zorgan exceeded appropriate protocols for species assessment. The abduction of your citizens was unauthorized, yet sanctioned by your Empire's standard procedures, countered General Taggart. Let us be clear, this was not one commander's error, but the result of institutional arrogance. Your Empire viewed us as specimens, not equals. The negotiations were tense, protracted, and unprecedented. The KR-THAC, accustomed to either conquering or being courted by less advanced species, found themselves in the unique position of negotiating with a species they had underestimated catastrophically. The final agreement, formalized as the Solar Accords, established humanity's sovereign rights within their solar system and a demilitarized zone extending 2 light-years in all directions. The KR-THAC Empire agreed to reparations for the abductions, including controlled technology transfers in medical and environmental fields. Most significantly, Earth was granted formal recognition as an independent power, not a protectorate or client state, but a sovereign entity with whom the Empire would maintain diplomatic relations. High Commander Zorgan, after providing valuable intelligence during his captivity, was returned to the Empire as a gesture of good faith, though his fate upon return was unlikely to be pleasant. The remaining KR-THAC prisoners were also repatriated, carrying with them first-hand accounts of human capabilities and determination. As the KR-THAC delegation prepared to depart the solar system, Dr. Eris Thorne requested a final meeting with the senior representative. In a private chamber overlooking the blue-green expanse of Earth, she presented a data crystal containing her complete theoretical work on faster-than-light travel and space-time manipulation. A gesture of peaceful intent, she explained as the KR-THAC representative accepted the crystal with evident surprise. Your empire now knows we can defend ourselves. This is to show we can also collaborate, should your people choose that path. The representative studied the human scientist with newfound respect. The High Council misjudged your species, he acknowledged. That error will not be repeated. See that it isn't, Dr. Thorne replied evenly. Because now we're watching the stars too. On Earth, the aftermath of the conflict brought unprecedented changes. The Terran Defense Mandate evolved into a permanent unified government structure, maintaining the global cooperation forged during the crisis. Resources previously devoted to internal conflicts were redirected towards space exploration, defense, and adaptation of KR-THAC technology. The abducted humans who had played crucial roles in the conflict became reluctant celebrities and invaluable advisors. Eva Rostova accepted a leadership position in the newly established Terran Special Operations Command, training the first generation of soldiers prepared for extraterrestrial combat. Mei Lin headed a research division dedicated to understanding and improving upon KR-THAC biotechnology. Aisha Khan developed new communication systems based on her observations of alien technology, while continuing her advocacy for equitable distribution of the benefits from new technologies. Dr. Eris Thorne offered prestigious positions and unlimited research funding, chose instead to establish an independent institute dedicated to peaceful space exploration. Using the knowledge she had gained during her captivity, combined with her theoretical work and the controlled technology transfers from the KR-THAC, she led the development of humanity's first faster-than-light vessel. 3 years after the conflict, that vessel, named Defiance in acknowledgement of its origins, prepared for its maiden voyage beyond the solar system. On the observation deck, reminiscent of the one where she had first been abducted, Dr. Thorne watched the final preparations with a complex mixture of emotions. "Ready to make history again?" asked a familiar voice. Thorne turned to see Eva Rostova approaching, now wearing the uniform of a Terran fleet commander. The Russian officer had been assigned to oversee security for the historic first flight. "History has a way of finding us whether we're ready or not," Thorne replied with a faint smile. "The rest of the old Shadow Fawn crew sends their regards," Eva said. "Mei Lin is too busy with her new biotech to attend the launch, and Aisha is coordinating the communication systems for mission control." Thorne nodded, turning back to the viewport. "We've all found our ways to ensure humanity never faces such a threat unprepared again. And in doing so, we've changed the course of human history," Eva observed. "No longer isolated, no longer divided, ready to take our place among the stars." As the two women contemplated the journey ahead, a communication officer approached with an urgent message. "Dr. Thorne, Commander Rostova, we're receiving a transmission from the edge of the system. KR-THAC signature." They exchanged concerned glances and hurried to the command center. On the main display, a KR-THAC communication officer appeared, not threatening, but formal. "Greetings, representatives of Earth," the translated voice stated. "The High Council has authorized me to inform you that 3 additional species have been granted observer status at the Galactic Conclave. The Sol system is hereby formally invited to send a delegation to the next conclave session, scheduled for what you would measure as 16 Earth months from now." The significance of the invitation was lost on none present. The Galactic Conclave, mentioned in KR-THAC records but previously dismissed as irrelevant to primitive species, was the governing body for interstellar civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. The Empire's recommendation of Earth for observer status was unexpected. The KR-THAC representative continued with what might have been the alien equivalent of embarrassment. But recent events have demonstrated that traditional assessment protocols may require revision. After the transmission ended, a stunned silence filled the command center. It was Dr. Thorne who finally broke it, turning to Eva with the same determined expression she had worn during their captivity. "It seems our maiden voyage has a destination," she said quietly, "and humanity has an appointment with the galaxy." Commander Rostova nodded, her practical military mind already calculating the implications. "They still don't fully understand us," she observed, offering diplomatic recognition so soon after conflict. "No," agreed Dr. Thorne, "they don't understand us at all. And that may be our greatest advantage going forward." As the Defiance prepared for its historic journey, Earth continued its transformation. A planet united by crisis, tempered by conflict, and now poised at the threshold of a galactic community that had drastically underestimated its potential. The Karthak Empire had indeed come to regret its arrogance, but that regret had opened doors to possibilities beyond imagining. The girls they had captured as specimens had returned as conquerors. The planet they had dismissed as primitive had repelled their most advanced warships. And the species they had intended to study and eventually subjugate now stood ready to take its place among the stars, not as subjects of the Karthak Empire, but as equals in a much larger cosmic civilization. Humanity had been tested by fire and had emerged stronger for it, united, determined, and ready to forge its own destiny among the stars.